Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Arunachala Ramanaya. Namaskaram. Today, the first question I'm going to answer is one that someone had sent by email to the foundation. The question is, what is the proper way to attend to ourself/Brahman? This is a question many people ask, but it is a bit like asking, what is the proper way to look at the sun? If we want to look at the sun, we have to turn our eyes towards it and look. It's as simple as that. Likewise, if we want to attend to ourselves, we have to turn our attention towards ourselves and keep our attention fixed on ourselves. It's as simple as that. But what Bhagavan has taught us is extremely simple, but though it's extremely simple, it's also something very deep and very subtle. So it requires proper understanding. It is not that it's complicated, but we need to understand it clearly, because obviously if we don't clearly understand what we need to do, we won't be able to do it properly. So Bhagavan has given us a very nice definition, very clear and very unambiguous definition of Atma-vichara in Nana. In the 16th paragraph, towards the end of the paragraph, there's a sentence in which he says, Sadakalamam manate atmabil vetirapatukutan atma-vicharamendrupaya. The literal meaning of that is, the name Atma-vichara is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. Keeping the mind on ourself means keeping our attention on ourself. If you put your mind on a task, you're attending to it. So we often talk of keeping the mind on something. We're using the mind there in the sense of attention. So that is the implication here. When Bhagavan says keep our mind on ourselves, that means keep our attention on ourselves. The words he uses here are very simple. He says the first word of the sentence is sadakalamam, which means always. Most of us will feel it's not possible to always attend to myself. I'm able to attend to myself a little bit here and there, but always, how is that possible? It doesn't matter if we feel we're not able to attend always. But why Bhagavan puts this word there is that should be our aim. Our aim should be to attend to ourselves always. Even if we fall short of that aim, that is what we should be trying to do. As much as possible, we should be trying to attend to ourselves. So sadakalamam, always. Manate, my mind. Atmabil means, Atmabil is the locative case form of Atma in Tamil. That means in oneself or on oneself. Vaitirapatu means placing, putting, keeping. The verb ve means to put or to place. Vaitirapatu it gives an idea of continuity. Literally means placing. So we have to keep our attention fixed on ourselves. That is the implication. This is a very, very simple and very clear and very unambiguous definition. We simply have to keep our attention on ourselves. Atma-vichara, contrary to what many people misunderstand, Atma-vichara is not about asking who am I or asking to whom are these thoughts. It's simply keeping our attention fixed on ourselves. But in order to understand the question that I've been asked, what is the proper way of doing this? If we understand what is meant by Atma, oneself, we will understand what is keeping our attention on it. So this is where a little bit of depth and clarity of understanding is required. Now it seems to us that we are this body. in which the term body, as Bhagavan clarified, is a bundle of 5 sheaths. It's not just the physical form of the body. That is, we experience when we rise as ego. In other words, throughout the waking and dream state, we experience ourselves as I am this body, in which the word body refers to a bundle consisting of the physical form of the body, the annamaya kosha. That literally means the sheath composed of food, the life that animates this body, the pranamaya kosha, the sheath composed of breath or life, the manamaya kosha, the sheath composed of mind. That means the grosser functions of the mind, the perceptions, memories, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and so on. These are all what are collectively referred to as, in this context, as manam. The intellect or vijnanamaya kosha, that is the buddhi, that is the function, the mind in its function of discerning, judging, discriminating, reasoning, and so on. And finally, the will. The will consists of the vasanas, and that is what is referred to as the anandamaya kosha. It's also called the karana sarira, the causal body, because the vasanas are the cause for all these. Everything that appears is just a sprouting of the vasanas, as Bhagavan said. They're like seeds, and everything that appears is just a sprouting of those seeds. That's why the vasanas, which are cause for all this appearance of multiplicity, are called the karana sarira, or causal body. So these 5 sheaths, we collectively experience as I. In other words, these 5 sheaths make up the person that we seem to be. And we are aware of ourselves as I am this person. If we take any of these 5 sheaths to be ourself, we will take self-attention to mean attending to that, whatever we take ourselves to be. So if I take myself to be this body and I'm told to attend to myself, I can sit in front of a mirror and look at myself, or I can study books on anatomy and physiology to find out more about myself. But we need to understand that this body is not what we actually are. This is why Vedanta generally begins with neti neti. That is, neti neti means not thus, not thus. We first need to discriminate and understand what we are not in order to understand what we actually are. So though we now seem to be this body is not what we actually are. Why is that? Because if this body were what we actually are, we couldn't be aware of ourselves without being aware of this body. But now in the waking state, we're aware of ourselves as this body. In dream, we're aware of ourselves as some other body. So now we're not aware of ourselves as that dream body. And in dream, we're not aware of ourselves as this waking body. So neither of these bodies can be what we actually are. So it's very easy to recognize that this physical form of the body is something distinct from ourselves. We are also not the prana, the life force that animates this body. We are also not the mind or the intellect or the will. Why is that? Because these are things that appear in waking and dream and disappear in sleep. Since they disappear in sleep, they cannot be what we actually are, because though everything else disappears, though we cease to be aware of anything else in sleep, we continue to be aware of ourselves. That is, though we are in sleep, we are not aware of anything other than I am. We're aware of our own being. Obviously, our being is not an object of awareness, so we're not aware of any objects or phenomena. We are just aware of being, of our own being. For those who have difficulty recognizing this fact, we need to think about this carefully, because this is a crucial aspect of Bhagavan's teachings and of the teachings of Advaita more generally, because in order to understand what we actually are, we need to understand, but in sleep, not only do we continue to exist in sleep, we continue to be aware of our existence in sleep. Though we cease to be aware of anything else, we continue to be aware I am. We can understand this by considering the matter carefully. But we have three states of experience: waking, dream, and sleep. In waking and dream, we're aware of ourselves as a body, and we're consequently aware of so many other things. In sleep, we're not aware of ourselves as a body, nor are we aware of anything other than ourselves. But we are aware, now in the waking state, when we think about sleep, we are aware of having been in a state in which we were not aware of anything. So in order to be aware of having been in that state, we must have been aware when we were in that state. We were not aware of anything other than our own being. We were not aware of time or space or anything. We were just aware, I am. So if we find it difficult to grasp this, we just need to think about the matter a little carefully, try to understand it. It will become clearer to us the more we go deep in the practice of self-investigation. The fact that we exist in the absence of all other things in sleep will become clearer to us the more we investigate ourselves and thereby become familiar with our being as something distinct from these five sheaths. But it's good, but to the extent to which we can grasp this, to that extent will it help us in the practice of self-investigation. So we need the purpose of all this, and there's so many in classical Vedanta, in classical Advaita, they have what they call prakriyas. Prakriyas are ways of discriminating about this. For example, drik drisya viveka, distinguishing the seer from the seen. All these five sheaths and everything else we know, these are objects known by us. We are not the object, we are the subject, the knower of all these things. We are the witness, that which knows all these things. So that's one way of trying to distinguish ourselves from everything that we now mistake ourselves to be. Another way is analyzing our experience in the three states. And like this, there are a number of ways we can use our power of discernment, our power of discrimination, in other words, our intellect, to distinguish ourselves from everything that we now mistake ourselves to be. So, but these are all intellectual exercises. This is not the actual investigation. But it's a necessary foundation for the investigation, because if we are confused about what is meant by ourself, we will obviously be confused about what we have to attend to. So we first need to understand that we are not any object, we're not any phenomenon, we're not anything that appears or disappears. We are that in the view of which all these things appear and disappear. So all phenomena, they appear to whom? To me. Then who am I? That's why Bhagavan often put this question, to whom, to whom? Because whatever appears, all phenomena, they appear to whom? To me. So that's a very powerful aid for us to turn our attention back to ourselves. That's why Bhagavan often was putting this question, to whom or for whom are all these things. So we need to clearly understand that we are not any object or phenomenon. We are that which knows all these things, that in whose view all these things seem to exist. So what we essentially are is just consciousness or awareness. We're not awareness of this or that. We are the fundamental awareness I am. Because the only awareness that exists in all three states is this awareness of our own being. The awareness of our own being is what is referred to in Sanskrit as Sat Chit, being awareness. That is what we actually are. That is what shines in us as I am. But now, so we, in all three states, waking, dream, and sleep, we are always aware I am. But in waking and dream, we are not aware just I am. We're aware I am this body. I am such and such a person. I am Michael, or I am whoever. So the in this mixed awareness, I am this person, is what is called ego. That is, what is aware of itself as I am this person is ego. In this mixed awareness, there are two elements. There's I am, and there's an adjunct, what is added to it. Upadi in Sanskrit is the word. Upadi has a, the best word to translate it in English is adjunct, because it's something that is added on to us. But adjunct, adjunct doesn't quite capture the full meaning of the word upadi. Upadi means something that is mistaken to be something else, something that is superimposed on something else, something that is a disguise, something that one thing is mistaken to be another thing. That is what upadi is. So the person we take ourselves to be is an upadi. What we actually are is just this fundamental awareness I am, which is Satchit. But this Satchit is now seemingly conflated with these adjuncts. So we're aware of ourselves as I am this body. So we need to distinguish ourselves as the fundamental awareness I am from all other things. All other things are things that appear in our awareness and disappear in our awareness. They have no existence apart from our awareness. And they appear in our awareness only when we're aware of ourselves as I am this body. In other words, only when we rise as ego are we aware of all other things. But whether we rise as ego or not, we are always aware of our own being, I am. So what we essentially are is this being awareness, I am, Satchit. So this is what we have to attend to. People say, oh, but I'm not able to find this I. The I that says I am not able to find this I is itself the I, but it says it's not able to find. So it's not a matter of finding I. We are always aware I am. We simply have to attend to this I am. That is, there is never a moment when we are not aware I am. But though we are always aware I am, throughout waking and dream, our attention is constantly on things other than I. Because we are more interested in all these phenomena that appear than we are in our own being. We take our own being for granted. So though we are always aware I am, we are generally negligently aware I am. That is, we neglect, we overlook, we ignore this awareness I am and take great interest in attending to other things. So we slowly have to shift our attention, our interest away from other things, back towards our own being, to know who am I. So we, so it's what we are to attend to is not an object, but that to which all objects appear. For many people who are so, because before we come to Bhagavan and before we learn about this path, our mind was constantly going outwards, constantly grasping things other than ourselves. So to turn our attention back within to see ourselves seems something very elusive at first for many people. Some people get it immediately there and say, oh yes, it's very clear to them. But for some people, it's not so clear. But that's why we need to think about this carefully, and we need to try more and more just to attend to our being. The more we attend to our being, the clearer it will become. So the question is, what is the proper way of doing so? This is a question that all we can do is, as I've done now, which is to repeat the basic principles of Bhagavan's teachings. What we are to attend to is ourself. What is this ourself? It is not the body or mind or anything that appears or disappears. It's that in the view of which all these things appear and disappear. So we have to try to turn our attention away from all phenomena back towards ourself, the awareness in whose view all these phenomena appear. So this is what Bhagavan means in Nana when he says, but the name Atma Vichara is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. We have to try more and more to keep our attention on ourself, on our own being, on I am. For people who found it difficult to grasp this because their mind was so outgoing, Bhagavan gave a nice clue in the fifth paragraph of Nana. He says, even if one goes on thinking I, it will lead to that place. Why does he say about going on thinking I? I in this, I is a word, but every word refers to something. If we say any word, if we say car, a certain object comes to our mind. If we say house, a certain object comes to our mind. If we say a mango, a certain fruit comes to our mind. If we say running, a certain action comes to our mind. So all words are referring to something. So when we think of a word, that draws our attention to the, or reminds us of the thing that word is referring to. So when we say I, that if we repeat the word I carefully, slowly, and contemplatively, trying to see what did this word I refer to, that can be a very useful aid at first to drawing our attention back to ourselves. When we say I, what did this word I refer to? Superficially, it refers to this body and mind. But what is it? Who knows this body and mind? I know it. So who is that I? By repeating that word, it can be a help to, it can help us to fix our attention on ourselves. But our attention is not to be on the word I. The word I is only an aid to fix our attention on that which the word I refers to. So trying to explain how to do this, to use a very crude example, but there's no adequate analogy for this, so we have to use something quite crude or gross to describe this. If we don't know how to ride a bicycle, we can read books about how to ride a bicycle. We can listen to lectures about how to ride a bicycle. And we can learn all about balance, about center of gravity, and about so many things. But however much we read about riding a bicycle or study about riding a bicycle, we won't be able to ride a bicycle until we actually get on a bicycle and try. When we first get on a bicycle, we don't have a good balance, so we wobble and we fall. But if we persevere in trying, we slowly get the hang of it. And after some time, after a few weeks of trying, it becomes second nature to us. Then once we've learned to ride a bicycle, there's nothing easier than riding a bicycle. It's a bit like this. We have to start trying to put what Bhagavan has taught us into practice. At first, certainly we will wobble and fall, but if we persevere in trying, we'll slowly get the hang of it. We'll slowly become familiar with our being as something distinct from all the things that we now mistake ourselves to be. And as we go deeper in this path, this distinction will become clearer and clearer until finally we'll be aware of ourselves as we actually are. We'll distinguish ourselves perfectly from all that we now mistake ourselves to be. How do we distinguish ourselves from everything else? Not by attending to anything else, but only by attending to ourselves. The more we attend to ourselves, the more the adjuncts, the upadis, will drop off. Because these upadis are not holding on to us. We are holding on to the body. It is not the body that says I, it is we who say, I am this body. So it's we who are holding on to the body. The body isn't holding on to us. That's why Bhagavan said, everyone complains about bondage, but bondage isn't something that has come and caught us. The bondage is self-created because we're holding on to all these external things, the body and so on. We complain that we are bound to these things, but we are not at all bound to them. We seem to be bound only because we are holding fast to them. So the nature of the ego is to hold on to things other than itself. Ego cannot rise, stand, or flourish without constantly grasping things other than itself. And the first thing it grasps is this body consisting of 5 sheaths. So what we are trying to do in self-investigation, we are trying to switch this grasping. Instead of grasping anything else, we're trying to grasp ourselves. The more we hold on to ourselves, the more we are thereby letting go of other things, and gradually these upadhis will drop off, and we'll become more and more clearly aware of ourselves as something distinct from all these things. And if we go deeper and deeper in this practice, we will eventually reach a point where we remain in complete isolation from all these adjuncts to which we are now so attached. When we isolate ourselves from these adjuncts, this is what is referred to in Sanskrit as kaivalyam. Kaivalyam means isolation. We are isolating ourselves. Kaivalyam comes from the word kevala, which means oneness. So we are separating ourselves from everything else. That is what we are doing by this practice of self-investigation. We are holding on to ourselves, and to the extent to which we hold on to ourselves, we thereby separate ourselves from everything else. So this practice is very, very simple, but it's simple in the sense it's not a difficult practice. There's nothing complicated we're asked to do. But though it's very simple, it's a very subtle practice. So it requires a certain subtlety and depth of understanding. That's why in classical Advaita, they emphasize this very much, that the process is a threefold process of sravana, manana, nididhyasana. Sravana literally means hearing. But it also, by implication, it also implies studying. So we need to study Bhagavan's teachings carefully. We need to pay close attention to his teachings. And we need to try to make sense of them. Trying to make sense of them is what is called manana. Manana means reflection, thinking deeply about it. So to make sense of these words, like when Bhagavan says, the name Atma Vichara is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. We need to think about it, try to make sense of it. What is it Bhagavan is trying to tell us here? So that is, Sravana is hearing the words, Manana is making sense of them. And the third one is Nididhyasana. Nididhyasana literally means deep contemplation. That is putting what we've understood into practice by turning our attention back within to attend to ourselves. So Nididhyasana is the actual practice of self-investigation. So this is very simple, but we need to understand it very clearly. That's why we need to read Bhagavan very carefully. And when I say read Bhagavan very carefully, my suggestion is that we should focus primarily on Bhagavan's own original writings, because there are so many books that have recorded what Bhagavan is supposed to have said. But the problem with all those books, many of them have not recorded very accurately what Bhagavan said, because the people who recorded it, no one recorded with a tape recorder or anything. The people who recorded these various talks and Maharshi's Gospel day by day and all these books, they listened to these conversations. Then they went away and they wrote down what they remembered of the conversation. But when we hear something, our mind is constantly interpreting things. When we hear something, we try to make sense of it. And depending on how much depth of understanding people hearing the same thing will understand it in different ways, because it goes through the filter of our own understanding. And then afterwards, if we try to remember it, firstly, it's gone through the filter of our understanding, and secondly, it has to go through the filter of our memory. So we record what we remember of what we understood of what was said, rather than what was actually said. So these books that record Bhagavan's teachings are often not very accurate. That's one problem. Another problem is, as Bhagavan often said, teaching has to be according to the taught. So in many of the conversations, we can see Bhagavan is modifying or diluting his teaching to suit the understanding capacity and the willingness to understand of the person he was speaking to. There's no point in trying to convince someone of something they don't want to understand. So Bhagavan has to, when Bhagavan is answering questions, he gives answers that are appropriate to the person who is asking those questions. So many of the answers that Bhagavan gave do not necessarily represent his core teachings. But in his principal works, in his own writings, works like Nana, Uludunapadu, Upadeshundia, Amma Vidde, Ekama Panchakam, some of the verses of Uludunapadu and Abandam, Aplapatu, and the 5 hymns, Arunachastut Panchakam, Aksharam Malai, Navamani Malai, Patikam, Ashtakam and Pancharatnam. These are all Bhagavan's own original writings. And here in these works, we can find out what his real message was, he wasn't modifying his teaching to suit the hearer. In these works, he's given his teachings as they actually are. So, and he himself wrote it. So we have, provided we either can read it in the original Tamil, or we read accurate translations. From these works, we can understand what Bhagavan is actually intending to teach us. So if we read Bhagavan's works, think about them carefully, and try to put them into practice, slowly, it will become more and more clear to us what he means by keeping the mind on oneself, which is all that very Statma Vichara, keeping the mind on oneself. In other words, keeping our attention on ourselves. So we should also be patient with ourselves. That is, we can be studying Bhagavan. Studying means doing the Sravana, the Manana, and most importantly, the Nididhyasana. Not only reading and thinking about it, but also trying to put it into practice. Because the study but Bhagavan's teachings are extremely practical. So without putting them into practice, we are not really studying them. It's not just a matter of reading and thinking about it. We can truly understand Bhagavan's teachings only to the extent we put them into practice. So this is a process. Bhagavan's teachings become clearer and clearer to us as time goes on. As we go deeper and deeper in the practice, the same words that we've been reading maybe for many years, they gradually become clearer and clearer to us. We see more depth of meaning and greater clarity in the words that we've maybe been reading for decades, but they gradually become clearer to us as we go deeper in the practice. Because the question was, what is the proper way to attend to ourself / Brahman? Obviously, ourself and Brahman are one and the same thing. There's no Brahman other than ourself. Tattvamasi, you are that. But because the question was worded in this way, Bhagavan has to give this will give another perspective on the same subject. Bhagavan has answered this question very clearly in the first Mangalam verse of Uludunapadu. When Bhagavan first wrote this verse, initially he wrote only the last 2 lines. The meaning of the last 2 lines of this verse that is the last two lines are ulla porul ulla levan. That means ulla porul means the existing substance, the sat vastu, the thing that actually exists. Ulla porul. Ullal means thinking or meditating. Evan means how. So how thinking, the ulla porul, the existing substance, that which is actually exists, how to think of that. So Bhagavan, that's a question. Ulla porul, ulla levan. How to think of that, how to meditate on. Well, Bhagavan uses a simple Tamil word, ullal, which literally means thinking. He's using it here in the sense of meditation. So how to, and ullal can also mean investigate. So it means both meditating and investigating. That ulla porul. Ulla porul is a Tamil term, but it's referring to Brahman. It's referring to that which actually exists. So how to think of this ulla porul? And the answer he gives is ullate, ullapadi, ullade, ullal. That ullate means in the heart, in other words, deep within ourselves. Ullapadi, as it is, that's an adverb. Ullate means being. It's ulladu means being. Ullade is a intensified form of being. So it means only being as it is in the heart. Ullal is meditation or is investigation or is thinking of Brahman. So according to Bhagavan, the only way to meditate on Brahman, because Brahman cannot be an object we meditate on, so the only way to meditate on it is to be as it is in the heart. So that is what Bhagavan wrote at first. Later, he added the first two lines. The first two lines begin with first another rhetorical question, and then an extension of that first question that he asked, ulla porul, ulla levan, how to meditate on that ulla porul. He says more about what that ulla porul is. So in the first sentence, he says, ulladu, alladu, ulla unnabu, ullado. Ulladu means what is. What is means in the sense of what actually exists, not what merely seems to exist. Because according to Advaita, there's only one thing that actually exists. That one thing is ourself. Everything else is just an appearance, because everything else appears and disappears. So it's not real. Other things seem to exist, they don't actually exist. So ulladu is the one thing that actually exists. It's what exists always. So ulladu, alladu. Alladu means, well, this first sentence can be interpreted in a number of ways, but we can take alladu to mean, ulladu, alladu means if what exists were not, except for what exists. Ulla unavu. Ulla unavu means the existing awareness or real awareness, actual awareness, ullado, would it exist? So one meaning of this first sentence is, if what exists were not, would existing awareness exist? That is, there has to be, the very fact that there's awareness means that there's something that exists. That's one way of taking the meaning. Another way of taking the meaning is we can take alladu to mean except. So we can also take the sentence to mean, except as ulladu, does ullavu exist? In other words, ullavu is nothing but ulladu. What awareness is nothing but existence and nothing but being. This, as Bhagavan puts it very nicely in verse 23 of Upadesha Undiyar, because of the non-existence of any awareness other than what is, to know what is awareness. He uses the same words, ulladu and unuvu there. That is, if awareness was something other than what exists, it would be a non-existent awareness, and hence it couldn't be aware of anything. So, and So the awareness that knows what exists cannot be other than what exists. So what exists is awareness. That's another meaning of this sentence. There's also a third meaning, which is also very relevant in this context, because Ulla Unavu, the basic meaning, the obvious meaning, is existing awareness in the sense of actual awareness, real awareness. But Ulla is also the infinitive of the verb ulu, which means to think or meditate, the same word that he uses in the second and third sentences. So we can also take this to mean, other than uladu, is there an awareness to think of it or to meditate on it or to investigate it? So what is investigating or what is meditating is itself what is to be meditated upon. So there's so many deep meanings Bhagavan has embedded in this verse. So that's the first sentence. Then the second sentence is the sentence which ends with the words that Bhagavan wrote when he first wrote the word. The initial question was Ulla Porol Ulla Levan. How to or who can meditate on that Ulla Porol, the existing reality. And so he says more about that. What he says is, Ulla porul, ulla lara, ulla te, ulla dal, ulla menum, ulla porul, ulla levan. What that means is, ulla porul, ulla lara, ulla te, ulla dal. Since the ulla porul, the existing substance, brahman, satvastu, exists in the heart, ulalara, without thinking, without thought, that exists beyond thought, we can say, but literally it means without thought. And then he says, ulla menum, ulla porul. Ulla menum means which is called heart. So that existing reality exists in the heart without thought. So how to meditate on that existing reality, existing substance, which is called heart? This ulam menum also has another meaning. Ulam, the obvious meaning of ulam is heart. But ulam is also, it's a form that is not used in ordinary language. In fact, the verb ul is not a very commonly used word. It's, but if you want to say we are, using this word ul, you would say, the normal way of saying it would be ulom. Ulom means we are. That you don't, the we is implied in the ending of the verb. So ulom means we are. But in literary language, you can also say ulam to mean we are. Bhagavan uses that word ulam in that same verse 23 of Upadesha, after saying Ulladu is Unavu, what exists is awareness, he then says Unavu namai ullam. That means awareness exists as we. In other words, we are awareness. So that we are is ulam. So ulla menum ulla porul, besides meaning the existing reality, which is called the heart, it also means the existing reality, which is called we are. We are here implies I am, because Bhagavan often used the word we in Tamil. That in Tamil, there are two words that mean we. There's nam and nangal. Nam is an inclusive form of we. Nangal is exclusive. So if you're talking to someone and you say nangal, you're talking about yourself, but you're not including that other person. Say if a French person were talking to a German person, or let's say a Tamil person were talking to a Telugu person, and he wanted to say we Tamils, he would use nangal, excluding the other person, because the other person is Telugu, not Tamil. If he wants to say we Indians, he would use, he's including the other person, so you use nam. So the word Bhagavan uses, when Bhagavan uses the word we, as he does a lot in Uludunaptu and elsewhere, the word he's using is nam. He uses this word nam, which means we in an inclusive sense, in order to include us in the say. If he were to say I, it would exclude us. If he were to say you, it would be as if he's talking down at us and excluding himself. So he uses nam as an inclusive form of the first person pronoun, but it doesn't imply plural. We can say it's an inclusive form of the first person singular pronoun. Though it's plural in form, it implies singular. So ullam, which means we are, implies I am. So that ulla porul is called I am. That's also another, there's so many deep implications in Bhagavan. The words Bhagavan uses, he uses words very carefully, but with very deep implication. So since this ulla porul exists in the heart without thought, who can and how to meditate upon this ulla porul, which is called heart or which is called I am. Of course, I am is itself the heart, is the implication. How to meditate on it? We obviously can't meditate upon it as an object. And we can't meditate upon it by thinking because it's beyond thinking. We can only meditate upon it by being in the heart as it is. So why this verse is particularly important, Bhagavan has explained here what is the real meaning of Brahma Dhyana, meditation on Brahman. Brahman cannot be an object known by us. It cannot be something other than ourselves. So we cannot meditate on Brahman as an object. We can meditate on Brahman only by being Brahman. So what is the connection between this verse, where he's emphasizing by implication that Atmavichara is just being? Being as we actually are is Atmavichara, is basically what he implies here. What is the connection between this and that other passage I talked about earlier from Nana, in which Bhagavan said, the name Atmavichara is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. What is the connection between keeping the mind on ourselves and being Brahman, or being as we actually are? They're actually one and the same thing. But to understand this, we need to understand a little bit more about Bhagavan's teachings. That is some of the fundamental principles of Bhagavan's teachings. That is, as Bhagavan makes clear in verse 25 of Uludunaptu, ego cannot rise, stand, or flourish without grasping form, without grasping things other than itself. Grasping things other than ourselves means attending to and being aware of things other than ourselves. Being aware of anything other than ourselves is a mental activity, because all other things are mental fabrications. So without activity of the mind, there cannot be knowledge of anything other than ourselves, because it's the mind that has produced all these other things. Moreover, since these things are other than ourselves, if we attend to them, there's a movement of our mind or attention away from ourselves towards that other thing. So attending to anything other than ourselves is an action. But attending to ourselves is not an action. Firstly, because when we attend to ourselves, our awareness is not, awareness or attention is not moving away from ourselves towards other thing. It's remaining in ourselves. So there's no movement there. That's one reason. And another reason is, as Bhagavan makes clear in that verse 25 of Uludunaptu, the nature of ego cannot rise, stand, or flourish without grasping things other than itself. But if instead of grasping things other than itself, grasping form, as he puts it there, for all the forms are things other than ego, because Bhagavan clarifies in that verse that ego is formless. Uruvatra peyahande, formless demon ego, or formless phantom ego. So ego has no form of its own. So whatever forms it grasps are things other than itself. So ego cannot rise, stand, or flourish without grasping things other than itself. But what happens if ego tries to grasp itself? If it tries to grasp itself, it subsides. Because when it grasps other things, it's like holding a pillar or something. We're holding on to something to stand. But if we try to grasp ourselves, we fall, because the ego's got no legs of its own to stand on, so to speak. So if instead of grasping other things, grasping forms, if it tries to grasp itself, it subsides and dissolves back into its source. So by grasping ourselves, by attending to ourselves, it is not an activity, but a cessation of activity, because to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we as ego thereby subside. And when we subside, all our activity subsides. So the perfect way to bring about stillness of mind, we don't need to do anything to attain stillness of mind except to attend to ourselves. But of course, we're not attending to ourselves merely to still the mind. In yoga, the aim is chitta vritti nirodha, stopping the mental activity. In Atmavichara, that is not our aim. The stopping of the mental activity is a byproduct of attending to ourselves. But why are we attending to ourselves? Not just to stop mental activity. We are attending to ourselves in order to know who am I. So by this Atmavichara, we bring about the cessation of mental activity, the aim of yoga, and we also at the same time know what we actually are. So there's a double benefit there. Because if we merely bring about cessation of mental activity, the mind will rise and start being active again. But if we know what we are, mind will be destroyed. So to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we as ego thereby subside. And where do we subside? Back into our source. And what is our source? Our own being, I am. So by attending to ourselves, we are being in the heart as it is. That is, to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we are thereby being in the heart as it is. Which, as Bhagavan says here, that is the true meditation upon the Ulaporul, upon Brahman. So true Brahma Dhyana is nothing but keeping our attention on ourselves and thereby being as we actually are. Because what we actually are, that is Brahman. So that it was a simple question, but I've given a rather elaborate answer. But I hope there's at least some elements in some of these answers, in some of the points all I've been doing, I've been pointing out what Bhagavan has taught us. So I hope that some of the pointers that Bhagavan has given in these various passages I've discussed will help the person who asked this question and anyone else who feels inclined to ask similar questions. I hope it will give them some pointer towards how to put this into practice. Because though this is a very, very simple practice, because it's very deep and very subtle, it can't be, no words are adequate to describe this practice. Because this practice, as Bhagavan indicates in this verse, we are meditating on that which is beyond thought. So we can't by thought meditate upon that. We can meditate on it only by being as we are. And we can be as we are only by attending to ourselves. So it's a very, very subtle practice, but at the same time, a very simple practice. Not only simple in the sense it's not a complicated practice, it's also very simple in the sense that it is very easy. Why it seems difficult is because of our lack of love. Because to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we thereby subside. So attending to ourselves is itself surrendering ourselves. So until and unless we are willing to surrender ourselves completely, we will not be willing to keep our attention fixed firmly on ourselves. When we start off on this path, it may seem a little we're trying to attend to something that seems very elusive, very, very intangible in some sense. If we think about it, what we're actually attending to is the one thing that we always clearly know, our own being, I am. So that's all we have to do. Just attend to our being, and by attending to our being, we thereby subside in our being, and that is the state of being in the heart as it is. That is not only Brahma Dhyana, it's Brahma Nishta. It's standing firmly as Brahman, being firmly fixed as Brahman. So I hope that was a helpful answer, at least for some people.
Michael, should I ask some of the questions? There are about 4 or 5 questions. Okay, the first one is, are the vasanas or inclinations the main or even the only cause which distracts us from turning the attention to the sense I am? And are there any other ways to let go of the vasanas, or is the answer self-attention every time? And just a part of this is that, are even any preferences for the world, people, or emotions to be the way we want? Are these also vasanas?
Yes, that is, first we need to understand what vasanas are. Bhagavan used the term, vasana by itself means inclination. The vasanas that Bhagavan generally talked about were Vishaya vasanas. Vishayas means objects or phenomena. In other words, anything other than ourselves, anything that appears and disappears is a Vishaya. So the inclination to seek happiness in things other than ourselves, those inclinations are Vishayas. Those inclinations are Vishaya vasanas. These Vishaya vasanas are the seeds that give rise to likes, dislikes, preferences, desires, attachments, hopes, fears, and so on. So all that is likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, hopes, fears, preferences, and all these things in their seed form are what are called vasanas. So vasanas are the basic inclinations that give rise to all these other forms of desire, likes, dislikes, and so on. But Bhagavan also talked sometimes about another vasana, that is Sat vasana. Sat means being, it means our own being. So Sat vasana is the inclination to seek happiness in our own being. That the word to seek happiness is not there, but why do we have an inclination towards Vishayas? We have inclination towards Vishayas because we think we will gain happiness from those Vishayas. So how can we cultivate this Satvasana, the inclination to seek happiness, the inclination to attend only to our own being, only to the extent to which we understand that our own being is itself the happiness that we are seeking, will we gain the inclination to attend to it, to attend to our being. So when we attend to ourself, we are being swayed by our Satvasana. When we attend to other things, we're being swayed by those other vasanas. There was something in the wording there I wanted to say. Shalini, would you mind reading the question again? Because there was something in the wording there that I just wanted to clarify, and I can't remember what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it says, are the vasanas or inclinations the main or even the only cause which distracts us from turning the attention to the sense I am? The second part is, are there any other ways to let go of vasanas, or is the answer self-attention every time?
All right, okay. Letting go of vasanas, that is, vasanas are our own inclinations, our inclination to hold on to other things. But vasanas have no power of their own. Vasanas seem to have a hold over us because they're our own likings, our own likes and dislikes. So, the answer to the first question, by the way, is yes, vasanas are the only obstacle, because it's only that vasanas are what make us inclined to attend to other things. And if we had no inclination to attend to other things, we would be happily attending to ourselves. So vasanas are the only obstacle. So it's not so much a matter of letting go of the vasanas as not allowing ourselves to be swayed by the vasanas. Some people ask, how can I overcome all my vasanas? How can I conquer my vasanas? We don't have to overcome vasanas. We don't have to conquer them. We simply have to refrain from allowing them to overcome us, allowing them to sway us. Bhagavan often uses, when he's talking about vasanas, he talks about the sway. For example, the sway of vasanas. For example, in the 8th paragraph of Nana, when he's talking, he begins. I'll just get that paragraph because it's an important paragraph. I'll just read the first few sentences. That is, he begins by saying, "For the mind to cease, except vicharana, there is no other adequate means." So Bhagavan is the point he's repeatedly emphasizing in Nana, but the only adequate means to bring about the permanent cessation of mind is vichara. And then he goes on to say, it made to cease, that the word he uses in Tamil can mean cease or subside. It made to cease or subside by other means, the mind remaining as if it had ceased will again rise up. So if we make the mind subside by any other means, it will remain as if subsided for a while, but it will again rise up, is what Bhagavan is saying there. Then he goes on to say, even by pranayama, that is breath restraint, the mind will subside. However, so long as the prana remains subsided, the mind will also remain subsided. And when the prana emerges, the mind will also emerge and wander under the sway of its vasanas. So this is one place where he's talking about the mind wandering under the sway of its vasanas. That is, as soon as we allow our attention to go outwards, we allow it to go outwards under the sway of our vasanas, and then we wander about under the sway of these vasanas. And as Bhagavan explains in the 10th paragraph of Nana, he begins by saying, Tondru totu varukindra vishaya vasanegal, alavatra vanai kadalalegal pol tondrinam. Even though vishaya vasanas, which come from time immemorial, that tondru totu, it implies the same as time immemorial, from age old. They come from, we can't say when. They come from time immemorial, even though they rise in countless numbers like ocean waves. So vasanas are constantly rising throughout the waking and dream states. Vasanas are constantly rising. And it's vasanas that appear as thoughts and as all these phenomena. So these vasanas are constantly rising. So we're all, throughout the waking and dream state, except when we are attending to ourselves, we are constantly acting under the sway of our vasanas. That is, every movement of our mind, the movements of the mind, the thinking, and emotions and everything, all are under the sway of the vasanas. And the actions of the mind, the mental activity, is what leads to actions of speech and action of body. So ultimately, all actions are under the sway of vasanas. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 2 of Upadeshundya, though the fruit of action passing away, remain as seed and cast one into the ocean of action. Remain as seed mean they remain as vasanas. So vasanas are the cause of all karma. So when he says in the Sanskrit version of that verse, Kriti Mahodado Patana Karanam, the cause for falling in the great ocean of action, he doesn't specify it in the Sanskrit, but that cause he's referring to is what he makes clear in Tamil, it's the seeds. And those seeds are the vasanas. So vasanas are what cause us to act. So all actions are under the sway of vasanas. And another place where he talks about acting under the sway of vasanas is in paragraph 19. He says, there are not two minds, namely a good mind and a bad mind. What he means by that is there are not two kinds of mind. We see some people say, oh, this person is a good person, another person, that person is a bad person. But Bhagavan is saying there are not two minds, namely a good mind and a bad mind. Mind is only one. Only the vasanas are of two kinds, namely subha and asubha. Subha means agreeable, virtuous, or good, and asubha means disagreeable, wicked, harmful, or bad. And then he goes on to say, when the mind is under the sway of subha vasanas, it is said to be a good mind. And when it is under the sway of asubha vasanas, a bad mind. So all actions we do under the sway of vasanas. So if our mind is under the sway of subha vasanas, we will behave in a pleasant manner. People will find us to be an agreeable person. We won't be, well, of course, some people will dislike us, however good we are. There'll be some people who dislike us. But generally speaking, if we act under the sway of subha vasanas, agreeable vasanas, we will behave in an agreeable manner. And if we act under the sway of asubha vasanas, disagreeable vasanas, we'll behave in a disagreeable manner. And people will say, oh, this fellow is such a bad fellow. So we act under the sway of vasanas. All actions are under the sway of vasanas. All actions of mind, speech, and body are under the sway of vasanas. So what we need to avoid doing is allowing those vasanas to sway us. The most effective way to avoid being swayed by vasanas, by the Vishaya vasanas, is to cling to our own being. Because to the extent to which we're clinging to our own being, we're thereby not attending to anything else. So we're not being swayed by those Vishaya vasanas. And the more we cling to our being, the more the Vishaya vasanas are thereby weakened, and the Sat vasana is thereby strengthened. Because as I was beginning to say at the beginning, vasanas have no strength of their own. Vasanas have no independent existence. They're our own vasanas, our own inclinations, our own likes and dislikes. So the vasanas are strengthened to the extent to which we allow ourselves to be swayed by them. So suppose we had some particular inclination, maybe some bad inclination, maybe we have an inclination, let's say, to smoke cigarettes. That's a very, an addictive behavior like that is a very good example of a vasana. So we have an inclination, because of habit, we've got this strong inclination to smoke cigarettes. For people who because tobacco is a very addictive substance, for people who, once they get into the habit of smoking, it's very difficult to break that habit because they have a very strong inclination to smoke. And the more they smoke, the more that inclination is strengthened because they're allowing themselves to be swayed by that inclination. But if they decide, no, this smoking is not good for my health, so my health is more important than anything else, so I must, in order to preserve my health, I must give up smoking. There they've got two vasanas. They've got one vasana, the inclination to, of course we've got countless vasanas, but I'm just saying these are two opposing vasanas. Well, on the one hand, they've got a vasana to smoke, an inclination to smoke. On the other hand, they've got an inclination to avoid smoking in order to maintain their health. So it's up to us. When we have many of our vasanas, for all of us, we have vasanas pulling us in different directions. It's we who decide which vasanas we allow ourselves to be swayed by. This is where the real freedom of will comes. That is, we all, the vasanas we've got, what have come from the past, all the vasanas we've cultivated in the past is what we're now lumbered with. But we have, however strong our vasanas may be, we have the freedom. Either we allow ourselves to be swayed by them, or we don't allow ourselves to be swayed by them. So if supposing we're a person who unfortunately, as a teenager, got into this habit of smoking, and now we after many years, we've now come to understand smoking is very bad for my health, and the doctor may have warned us you need to give up smoking or you're going to cut your life short. So we've now got a new inclination, an inclination to avoid smoking. So these two inclinations are in conflict with one another. The more we allow ourselves to be swayed by the inclination to smoke, the more that vasana retains its strength. But the more we allow ourselves to be swayed by the inclination not to smoke, that inclination is strengthened and the inclination to smoke is weakened. So all of us, the whole of our life, of our ego life, is all a matter of being swayed by vasanas. But we are the master. The ego, whose vasanas are they? They're ego's vasanas. So it's up to us as ego. We have that freedom either to allow ourselves to be swayed by our vasanas or not to allow ourselves to be swayed by them. Generally, we allow ourselves to be swayed by the stronger vasanas. Why? Because we like the vasanas are our own liking. So we are swayed by vasanas because we like to be swayed by them. But if we understand that these vasanas are causing me harm, just like smoking is causing us harm, attending to anything other than ourselves is causing us harm. Because the more we attend to other things, the more we are immersing ourselves in this bondage, this samsara. So if we want to be free of samsara, we need to avoid being swayed by the Vishaya vasanas. And the way to avoid being swayed by the Vishaya vasanas is to be swayed instead by the Sat vasana, the inclination just to be. So the more we hold on to our being, the more we are strengthening the Sat vasana, because that is the vasana we are allowing ourselves to be swayed by, and the more we are thereby weakening the Vishaya vasanas, because we're not allowing ourselves to be swayed by them. So it's all a matter of vasanas. Bhagavan Murugan has recorded in Guruvachika Kovai. Bhagavan said this, all these in the Puranas, they give so many stories about the fight between the Devas and Asuras. The Devas are the gods and the Asuras are the demons. Bhagavan said all the significance of all these stories, this is a fight going on in the heart of every spiritual aspirant between, on the one hand, the Satvasana, that is the Devas, and on the other hand, the Vishaya Vasanas, the Asuras. So this is what the spiritual path is all about. It's this battle within our own will, within our own heart. And we need to take this battle seriously, because if for countless lives, we have been allowing ourselves to be swayed by these Vishaya Vasanas, and they've been causing us endless grief. So if we want to free ourselves permanently from the sway of these Vishaya Vasanas, we need to weaken them and strengthen the Satvasana. The more we cling to self-attentiveness, the more we are thereby weakening the Vishaya Vasanas, strengthening the Satvasana. And until eventually the Satvasana will become stronger than the Vishaya Vasanas. Only when the Satvasana is stronger than the Vishaya Vasanas will we be finally willing to surrender ourselves completely, to turn back within and to merge back forever into our own being. So it's all a matter of whether or not we are always being swayed by vasana, which vasanas we allow ourselves to be swayed by. Slowly, we are trying to wean our mind off the Vishaya vasanas and to cultivate this Satvasana. Satvasana is what is otherwise called bhakti, the love to know and to be what we actually are. So it's all a matter of, whether we allow ourselves to be swayed by vasanas or which vasanas we allow ourselves to be swayed by. So vasanas are the obstacle. But the root of the vasanas, we should always remember, is ego. So long as there is ego, there will inevitably be Vishaya vasanas. Ego is not the vasanas, but it's the very nature of ego to have vasanas, because we cannot rise, stand, or flourish as ego without grasping things other than ourselves. So as ego, we naturally have strong inclination to grasp those other things. That inclination to grasp things other than ourselves is what is called Vishaya vasanas. That is why, of all the five sheaths, the sheath that is closest to us, the sheath that is binding us most intimately, is the Anandamaya kosha, which consists of these vasanas. The Anandamaya kosha, which is also called the Chittam, the will, which consists only of vasanas. Well, in their subtlest form, they're called vasanas. In their grosser form, they're called likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, hopes, fears, preferences, and so on. I hope that adequately answered that question.
Thank you, Michael.
It was a clear answer.
Yes, I really appreciated that. And I'll also listen to it over several times to make sure I haven't missed anything. Thank you. I really appreciated that.
We have to continue letting our minds soak in Bhagavan's teachings, because the more we soak in Bhagavan's teachings, the more clarity we'll get and the more love we'll get to turn back within. So we shouldn't be afraid to hear these things over and over again. I myself am benefited by repeating these things. It's slowly sinking into me also.
That's beautiful.
Right. Okay. Because we're all on the same path. We're all up against the same obstacles.
Thank you.
Would you like to take the next question, Michael?
Yes.
Sort of just at the end of the last question, there's just a quote which says, "I have read," in quotation marks, "the great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences." And I wondered if this statement is in line with Sri Ramana's teaching.
Yes, if we take the preferences to mean the vasanas, yes.
Okay. And the next question is that in Guru Avacha Kovai verse 26, after verse 1166. Anyway, after verse 1166.
Okay, B26, that's a verse by Bhagavan.
Okay, B26. So, so in Guru Vacha Kovai, after B20, sort of verse B26, Sadhu Om and Michael James translation, it seems that before the word jealousy, one should add the word no to give the meaning of devoid of jealousy, free from jealousy. Do you agree? Thanks.
The translation is, know that he, the jnani, who is balanced both in success and failure, being happy with whatever is obtained according to prarabdha, having jealousy and okay, there's a word missing here. I don't know what the word is, but somehow it's because this was translated nearly 50 years ago, and then someone typed it and someone typed that, and finally an electronic copy was made. So someone has missed some word here. I have a feeling that is, I can't remember, but I think this is a translation of some verse. But wait a second, I'll see if I can find it. Okay, this is actually, this is a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, I think. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse 22. And it's also one of the verses that Bhagavan, it's one of the verses that Bhagavan included in Bhagavad Gita Saram. But this particular verse is a very, he's saying the same thing, but in a very, whereas in Bhagavad Gita Saram, it's a 4-line verse. Here he's expressing the same idea in a 2-line verse. Yeah, it means that instead of having jealousy, it should mean having given up jealousy, or having true. Yeah, but it means the opposite of what is actually printed here. So it's a printing mistake. Or a copying mistake in the process of somehow it coming into print. And whoever proofread it didn't read it, didn't spot this error. Have I answered that question correctly? I can't remember exactly what the question was, but it was something about someone. I think the person who asked the question was noticed there was an error there.
I think that should be all right, Michael.
Yeah.
It's an anonymous question.
Okay.
And
how exactly did they say it? They suggested something there.
Yes, it said in the translation, it seems the word before the word jealousy, one should add the word no to give the meaning devoid of jealousy, free from jealousy. Do you agree?
Yes. In effect, I think, in effect, that's what it means, yes.
Okay. Now, the next question is, there are two parts. One is simply saying that Robert Adams and his meetings with Ramana, what is Michael's position in light of new evidence that he invented the story? And the second question is, please expand on the idea that during sleep we are breathing only in order that others not put us in the grave. Is there a problem with the translation?
No, there's no problem with the translation. Firstly, about Robert Adams, I don't believe he ever came. I don't think he ever met Bhagavan. And people who were there in those days, nobody ever knew him. And some of the things he said, like that he stayed in the Osborne's house. Katya, who was living there at the time, she has no memory. I mean, she's absolutely sure he was. And so many things he says are inconsistent. He said that he was living in a hut in the Osborne compound and Bhagavan came to visit him. But in those days, Bhagavan, I mean, for more than 20 years, Bhagavan had never even crossed the road, let alone gone to Osborne's compound. So there's so many things he says. And people have pointed out to me in his in recordings, I think all that's been published is recordings of conversations he had. And he gives two quite different accounts of when he first met Bhagavan. So I don't think we have to take anything that Robert Adams said about his supposedly meeting with Bhagavan and supposedly things Bhagavan said to him. I don't think we have to take any of that seriously. It is a complete fabrication, I believe, but that's no concern of ours. But that's his lookout. Regarding this 8th paragraph of Nana, there's a bit of a history about that. I tried to make it clear in my translation. Those particular, there are 3 sentences there, but were not in the original Who Am I? The meaning of those 3 sentences are, however, in sleep, even though the mind has ceased, the prana does not cease. This was inserted after the sentence in which Bhagavan says, therefore, when the mind ceases, the prana also ceases. And when the prana ceases, the mind also ceases. After that, 3 sentences were later added. However, in sleep, even though the mind has ceased, the prana does not cease. It is arranged thus by the ordinance of God for the purpose of protecting the body, and so that other people do not wonder whether the body has died. When the mind ceases in waking and in samadhi, the prana ceases. These 3 sentences were not in the original manuscript written by Bhagavan. They were not in any of the manuscripts of Shiva Prakasham Pillai. They seem to have been added sometime after 1932, because I've seen early editions. I've seen the handwritten manuscript of Bhagavan when he wrote the essay version. That was once reproduced in the Mountain Path in June 1993. A facsimile of that, of Bhagavan's handwriting, was reproduced in the Mountain Path. I've also seen, in fact, I've got a copy of the first edition of Ramana Nutaratu, 1931. And I've seen some 1932 editions. It wasn't in any of those ones. It seems to have been added around about sometime between 1932 and 1936. What is said here is inconsistent with Bhagavan's central teachings, because according to Bhagavan, there is, I mean, for example, in verse 10 of Uludunapdu Anubandham, Bhagavan clearly says the body does not exist in sleep. So if the body doesn't exist, then the prana also doesn't exist, because the prana is part of the body. So this is not consistent with Bhagavan's teachings. What I suspect may have happened is that someone would have objected when they read that Bhagavan had written, therefore, when the mind ceases, the prana also ceases, and when the prana ceases, the mind ceases. Someone would have said, oh, but Bhagavan, in sleep, the mind ceases, but the prana continues. Why is that? Bhagavan would have understood from the question, but the questioner wasn't ready to understand his deeper teachings. So Bhagavan would have replied, saying something like this: "Oh, it's been arranged thus by the ordinance of God for the purpose of protecting the body, and so that other people do not wonder whether the body has died." Bhagavan may have given that answer, but that is what Bhagavan refers to as an answer given to the question of others. That is, there's a verse in Uludunapdu Anubandham, I think verse 33 in Uludunapdu Anubandham, in which he says that saying that Sanchita and Agamya cease, but Prarabdha remains for the jnani, is an answer given to the question of others. So Bhagavan often used to say this when Bhagavan often used to have to give diluted teachings to suit people who weren't ready to understand his deeper teachings, but he would later clarify to others that was just an answer given to the question of others. That means it's not an answer he would have given to someone who was ready to understand his teachings. But there are many people around Bhagavan and many visitors who were not ready to understand Bhagavan's deeper teachings, because Bhagavan's teachings are extremely radical. So if someone is not willing to accept the deeper teachings, Bhagavan has to give more superficial teachings to suit their level of maturity, or whatever we can say. So this is definitely an answer given to a question of others. This isn't an answer that Bhagavan gave to Shiva Prakasham Pillai, because Shiva Prakasham Pillai would not have asked such a question. But someone asked the question, Bhagavan would have given this answer, and then they would say, oh, Bhagavan, this is a very useful answer. Why shouldn't we add that in Nana? Bhagavan would have nodded. He said, okay, if you want to add it, you add it. So somehow it got added. But this is not, since Bhagavan made it very clear in so many other places that the body doesn't exist at all in sleep. And when he said the body doesn't exist in sleep, he means all the five sheaths don't exist in sleep. So there's no question of the prana remaining in sleep. It's only in the view of people in waking state, but a sleeping person, body seems to be there and their body seems to be breathing. But that's in the view of the people in the waking state. It's in their waking state that this appears to be the case. In sleep, nobody is aware of any body or prana or karana, sarira, or anything else. All we're aware of in sleep is I am. That's why Bhagavan said sleep is there's actually no difference between sleep and turiya. Sleep seems to be different from turiya because we've come out of it. So sleep, from a perspective of the mind in waking and dream, sleep seems to be a temporary state because we seem to have come out of sleep. But when we know ourselves as we actually are, we'll know that this state, which we previously took to be a temporary state and a state of darkness, is actually none other than Turiyatita. Bhagavan says very, very clearly and unequivocally in Guru Vatsaka Kovai. So, but many people are not ready to understand these deeper teachings, so Bhagavan has to give more diluted teachings to suit them. So this is an example of that, an answer given to the question of others. And we can see so many examples like this. If we read books like Talks and Day by Day and Maharshi's Gospel, some very good teachings of Bhagavan are there, but there are also many, many diluted teachings, answers given to the question of others. I hope that's a clear answer to that question. That's why in my translation of Nana that's available on my website, I didn't include those three sentences in the main text. I included them in a note in which I explained what I've just explained now.
Yeah, the next question. Yeah, one question is Guru Vacha Kovai checked by Ramana?
Most of it. That is, all of the verses were originally checked by Bhagavan, because Murugan would compose the verses, he would show to Bhagavan, Bhagavan would correct them. So more than, I think about 850 verses were published in the first edition of Guru Vachaka Kovai, which was published in 1939. So that was proofread by Bhagavan, and even during the proof correcting stage, Bhagavan was making changes to some of the verses, improving them, making the ideas clearer so that Bhagavan has very, very thoroughly checked that. And often when Murugan showed a verse to Bhagavan, or showed a couple of verses to Bhagavan, sometimes Bhagavan would condense two verses written by Murugan as one verse. Bhagavan would write his own, he would summarize the same idea in one verse, or sometimes if Murugan wrote a 4-line verse, Bhagavan would summarize it as a 2-line verse. So yes, Bhagavan very thoroughly checked it. Many more verses were composed between 1939 and 1950. All of those verses were shown to Bhagavan. However, most of those verses unfortunately were lost. That is, someone who was carrying Murugan's manuscript on a train somehow left them on the train, and they were never able to recover them. So about 1,000 verses of Guru Vachaka Kovai were lost. And Murugan later, from memory, he was able to reproduce 400 or 500 of those verses, about 400 of those verses, which were added later by Sadhu Om in the second edition, the 1972 edition. But Murugan, I think he wrote a verse, or anyway, he told Sadhu Om, when I tried to recover those verses from my memory, I found my memory was very, very a miser. My memory was very miserly. It wasn't ready to release these verses. So the verses he could remember, he rewrote, and that was about 400. But there were many more than 1,000 were lost permanently because of that. That's all Bhagavan's will. But we are very, very fortunate to have, I mean, now Guru Vachaka Kovai contains more than 1,250 verses. It's a great, great treasure. Apart from Bhagavan's own original writings, it's the most reliable source of Bhagavan's teachings.
Yeah, the next question. The question is just being or just looking, just aware, not attentive to anything, same as looking at oneself, aware as oneself? In my experience, attention to oneself, aware of my awareness, requires a certain amount of concentration and energy. My attention or fixing at oneself can't be maintained for long. My attention wavers off and becomes strained. It is easier and requires less effort to keep attention to my breath and concentration on certain points within my body, or just becoming aware without fixing anything.
Our attention is always on something. throughout the waking, the nature of the mind is to attend to something. So if we're not attending to one thing, we'll be attending to another thing. So there's no such thing as not attending to anything. We're always, if we think we're not attending to anything, we're not paying close enough attention to what is happening. Of course, attending to our breath is much easier than attending to eye, or it seems to be much easier. Why? Because we have strong Vishaya vasanas. And the breath is a Vishaya, like any other phenomena. Attending to anything other than ourselves seems to be much easier because we have such strong inclination to attend to something other than ourselves, because such is the nature of ego. But if we want to bring about the dissolution of ego, we have to attend to ourselves. It's only by attending to ourselves that ego will subside. So long as we're attending to the breath, we are thereby feeding ego. Attending to anything other than I is feeding and nourishing and sustaining ego. As Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uludunapadu, when he describes ego as a formless demon, and he says, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Form here means any phenomenon, anything that is in any way distinguishable from any other thing. It doesn't mean just physical forms. Every thought, every feeling, every emotion, all are forms. Everything is, all phenomena are forms. So by attending to phenomena of any kind whatsoever, we are thereby feeding and nourishing ego. So for ego can survive for any amount of time watching its breath. Its existence is not threatened by by attending to its breath or by attending to any other thing. But by attending to itself, its very existence is threatened. That's why it seems to us to be a struggle to attend to ourselves, because we don't want to attend to ourselves. Actually, there's nothing easier than attending to ourselves. But it's just like if you're standing on the edge of a cliff, there's nothing easier than to jump off the cliff. But you're not going to do it, are you? Because you don't want to, because you know, if you jump off the cliff, you're going to come to a nasty end down at the bottom of the cliff. So even however easy it may be to, if someone says, "Oh, go on, just jump," you'll find, no, I can't do it. Of course you can do it. You don't want to do it. It's exactly the same with self-attentiveness. When we attend to ourselves, we are, to the extent to which we are attending to ourselves, we're dissolving our very existence as ego. It's because of our lack of love, our lack of willingness to surrender ourselves, but it seems to be difficult. It seems to be a struggle because our Vishaya vasanas are much stronger than our Sattvasana. So by patient and persistent practice, we slowly have to wean our mind off its inclination to attend to anything other than ourselves. So attending to our breath is not a solution. If you attend to the breath, that will calm down the mind. If you have a very agitated mind, if you're very agitated by something, if you watch your breath, it'll calm your mind down. But that's only a temporary benefit, because something else will come along and agitate your mind sooner or later. So we are not here seeking temporary benefits. We're not here seeking manolaya, temporary dissolution of mind or temporary calmness of mind. We are here to know what we actually are. And the price of knowing what we actually are is the permanent destruction of mind. And that can be achieved only by self-attentiveness.
Okay. Yeah, the next question. Okay. The next question is, did Bhagavan recognize dualistic devotion as an important practice and supplement to Atma Vichara? Why did Bhagavan write Sri Arunachal Stuti Panchakam if Atma Vichara was all that is needed?
It's not a simple matter of dualistic devotion and non-dualistic devotion. of course, dualistic devotion has its place, but dualistic devotion means we are meditating on God, or we are worshipping God as something other than ourselves. Bhagavan has explained this very clearly in Upadeshundya. In verse 3 of Upadeshundya, he says, in verse 2 of Upadeshundya, he says, the fruit of action perishing remains a seed which makes us fall in the ocean of action, immerses us in the ocean of action. Therefore, action does not give liberation. And in the Sanskrit version, in Tamil, he says, Vidu tarile, it will not give liberation. In Sanskrit, he says even more forcibly, he says, Gati nirodhakam, it obstructs liberation. So action is not a means to liberation. However, in the next verse, he says, Nishkarmiya karma that is done for God will purify the mind and show the way to liberation. Nishkarmiya karma means action done without desire for any particular fruit. So if we do action just for the love of God and not for any benefit we can gain from that action, that is called Nishkarmiya karma. And Bhagavan, an important point in this verse is, Bhagavan doesn't separate bhakti and the path of bhakti and the path of karma. That is, you cannot do the karma without the love of God. The karma yoga, so-called karma yoga, the path of nishkarmiya karma, is not possible without the love of God, because actions are all motivated by something. So if we're not motivated by love of God, we'll be motivated by some other desire. So Bhagavan links nishkarmiya karma with bhakti. Nishkarmiya karma, he says, in Tamil, he says, kartanukakam. That means done for God. That implies done for the love of God. In the Malayalam version, he says, Ishwara pritiyenai. That literally means for the love of God. In the Sanskrit, he says, Ishwara pitam, offered to God. But they all convey generally the same idea. We must act with love of God. So what are these nishkarmiya karmas we can do for the love of God? In the next verse, he says, this is certain. Puja, japa, and dhyana are actions of body, speech, and mind, respectively. And in this order, each one is superior to the previous one. That is, better than puja, which is an action done by body, is japa, which is an action done by speech. And better than japa is dhyana, which is an action done by mind. That's what, and when he says it's superior, each one is superior to the previous one, what he means by superior, it is more efficacious in purifying the mind, because that's the subject. When he started in verse 3, he's talking about these karmas are a means to purify the mind. And he said that they will purify the mind and show the way to liberation. That is, only when the mind is purified will it get the clarity to recognize that liberation cannot be attained by any action, but only by being. That is what he leads up to. Then he goes through each of these in turn. In verse 5, he talks about puja. He says, worshipping any of the 8 forms of God, with the idea that these, any of the 8 forms, he said. The 8 forms means the 5 elements and sun, moon, and jiva. So it basically covers the whole of manifest existence. So worshipping anything with an idea that thinking that this is God is good worship of God. So Bhagavan isn't limiting puja to just the ritualistic puja. Any action you do, considering what you're, I mean, if you see a hungry person, you give them food, not with the idea I'm better off than you, so I can give you food, but with the idea you're a God who has come in this form, giving me an opportunity to serve you. If you feed poor people like that, with all humility and with devotion, that's a good worship of God. Then in the next verse, he talks about japa, and he says, rather than the best of hymns, japa is good. Rather than japa done aloud, japa done softly within the mouth is good. Rather than japa done softly within the mouth, japa done mentally is good. That is, and that japa done mentally is a type of dhyana. So when he says better, 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 he's talking about they're more efficacious in purifying the mind. Then that's in verse 6. Then in verse 7, he talks about dhyana. He says, rather than interrupted meditation that is uninterrupted, like the flow of a stream or the flow of falling of ghee, is best of all. Why is that? Why is uninterrupted meditation better than interrupted meditation? Because if we have love for God, when we meditate on God, our mind will remain fixed on God. But if in the middle of our meditation on God, we begin to think of, oh, I've got this bill to pay, I've got this problem in the office, I've got a quarrel with my husband or wife, or my children are misbehaving, or my parents are elderly and I've got to look after them, and we think so many things about other things, we are more concerned about these other things than about God. So how uninterrupted our meditation is a measure of the love with which we are meditating on God. So up to verse 7, Bhagavan is talking about action of body, puja, action of speech, japa, and action of mind, meditation. But then in verse 8 is the important verse. There he says, Anya bhavatin abana, rather than anya bhava, that's rather than meditating on God as other, Avanahamahum Ananya Bhavame. Ananya Bhava, that meditation on what is not other. In other words, meditation on God as not other than oneself, with the understanding he is I. He doesn't say with the understanding, he simply says in which he is I. That implies with the understanding that he is I. So if we understand that God is what is shining in us as I, we won't be meditating on some name or form of God. We'll be meditating only on I, which is nothing other than ourselves. So that's what he calls Ananya Bhava. And he says that is anatinam uttamam. It is the best among all. That means that attending to ourselves is the best of all types of it's the best of all types of devotion. It's the best of all types of meditation. It's the best of all types of spiritual practice, is what he says in verse 8. And then in verse 9, he says, Bhava Balatina, that means by the strength of meditation. In this context, that meditation he's talking about is the Ananya Bhava, meditation, the otherless meditation, with meditation on oneself. By the strength of that meditation, being in Sat Bhava, the state of being, which is Bhavanatita, which transcends meditation, that is Parabhakti Tattvam. That is the very nature, the very essence of supreme devotion. So what we have to learn from that is, so long as we're meditating on something other than ourselves, it's still an activity. So up to verse 7, he's talking about karma. But in verse 8, when he says, better than meditating on God as other, meditating on him as oneself is best among all. Meditating on him as oneself is not an activity, because to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we as ego thereby subside and activity thereby ceases. That's why he says in the next verse, by the strength of this meditation on oneself alone, on nothing other than oneself, being in Sat-bhava means the state of being, which transcends bhavana. Bhavana here means mental activity. So all meditation on anything other than ourselves is a bhavana, it's a mental activity. But this meditation on ourselves makes us subside in the state of being, and that is Parabhakti Tattva, that is the supreme devotion. So the supreme devotion is not doing anything, it is just being as we actually are. That is the state of surrender, which is the culmination of the path of devotion. So this Atma Vichara is the ultimate practice on the path of devotion. This is the best among all practices, because this will establish us in the state of being, which is God himself. God is our own very being. And then in the next verse, verse 10, he says, subsiding in the place from which we rose, and thereby just being as we are, that is karma and bhakti, that is yoga and jnana. So this practice of Atma Vichara is all these, it's fulfilling the aim of all these paths of karma yoga, bhakti yoga, yoga, I mean, Patanjali yoga, and jnana yoga. So this is the ultimate. So the meditating on God with form is not wrong, but we have to go beyond that. If we read Arunachala Stuti Panchakam, is Bhagavan, we shouldn't take Arunachala Stuti Panchakam just be dualistic devotion, because what Bhagavan is singing there is, we can see he's weaving the love of the name and form of Arunachala with the love of the true form of Arunachala, the Swarupa of Arunachala, which is I. He's constantly stressing there, you shine in the heart. And he even says explicitly in the in verse 2 of Arunachala Pancharatnam. I mean, it's implied in so many other places, but in verse 2 of Arunachala Pancharatnam, he says explicitly, since you always dance in the heart as I, they say your name is heart. That means, why does he say, since you dance in the heart as I, your name is heart? So that means the heart is in the heart. What is the meaning of that? In the same way, but Bhagavan says in the first Mangalam verse of Uludanapu, that we talked about earlier, he says that Ulaporul, the existing substance, exists in the heart without thought, and it's called the heart. So why does he say it is the heart and it's in the heart? What is in both these places? He's talking about well, in the Arunachala Pancharatnam, he's talking about Arunachala, but Arunachala is that Ulaporul. And it exists in the heart, and it's called the heart. What does this mean? We need to think about these things carefully. That is, what is the meaning of the word heart? Heart means the center. If there was something inside the center, that thing that is inside the center would be the center of the center. But we ultimately have to come to an ultimate center. So the ultimate, what is in the ultimate center is only itself. That is the heart. What is in the heart is only the heart. So Bhagavan says, you dance in the heart as I, and your name is heart. That means there he's talking about heart. We use the heart in so many different senses. We talk about the heart can refer to our emotions. It can refer to so many things. It can refer to our will, to our emotion, depending on the context in which it's used. But Bhagavan is here talking about the ultimate heart, the heart of the heart, their ultimate center. In the ultimate center, what is there is only, what is in the heart is only the heart. And that heart is I. And that is Arunachala. So we can see throughout Arunachala Stuti Panchakam, in the very first verse of Aksharammalai, Arunachala mena ahame. Arunachala is only I. It's one meaning of that. Those who meditate on the heart, but Arunachala is only I, you root out their ego. So there's the non-dual implication is there throughout Arunachala Stuti Panchakam. Though it's in the form of a, superficially, if we read it, it's a stotra in praise of an external name and form. But what appears in that external name and form is what? Bhagavan is constantly emphasizing, it's that which shines in the heart as I. So long as our mind is going outwards, we worship the external name and form. We have love for the form of Arunachala, we have love for the form of Bhagavan. But their external form is not their real form. That is not their Swarupa. The Swarupa of Arunachala and the Swarupa of Bhagavan is Atma Swarupa, the Swarupa of ourself. That is the real form. So Arunachala Stuti Panchakam, it is, but what Bhagavan is constantly praying for there is that love to turn within. So we can't just, we haven't truly understood Arunachala Stuti Panchakam if we take it just to be a dualistic devotion. It's a very, very deep, the deepest form of devotion. Yes, when our mind comes out, we want an external form to cling to. So Arunachala appears outwardly in the form of a hill. and in the human form of Bhagavan. But what did the human form of Bhagavan constantly tell us? Turn within, see yourself, because he is what is shining in our heart as I. When Janaki Mata fell at Bhagavan's feet and held his ankles and put her forehead on his feet, he asked her, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm holding on to the feet of my guru." He said, "This body is perishable, these feet are perishable. If you take this body to be guru, if you take these feet to be the feet of guru, you will be disappointed, because these are going to go away one day. They're going to die like everything else, like all other bodies. The feet of guru are shining in your heart as I. Cling to those feet, they alone will save you." So the function of the external form of guru is to turn us back within. And what Bhagavan is teaching us in words is what Arunachala taught him in silence. Bhagavan says in Aksharamlay, in one verse, in verse 43, I think it is, he says 43 or 44, 44, Tirambiyaham. Tirambiyaham means turning within. Tane dinam ahakankan. See yourself daily or constantly with the inner eye. The inner eye means the eye of attention. Terium, it will be known. Endranayan Arunachala. Thus you said, my Arunachala. So Arunachala, how did Arunachala say that to Bhagavan? Arunachala is in the form of a hill. It won't speak in words. What Arunachala taught Bhagavan is silence, is what Bhagavan is teaching us in words. In other words, it is Arunachala himself who has appeared in the form of Bhagavan, because we're not able to understand his silent teaching, but is going on eternally. Arunachala has appeared in the human form of Bhagavan in order to tell us in words what he's eternally teaching us in silence, which is turn within, see yourself within I, and it will be known. So we can't say Arunachala Stuti Panchakam is dualistic devotion. It is a movement away from the worship of name and form towards a deeper worship of the real form of Arunachala, the Swarupa of Arunachala, which is shining in the heart as I. So many places, Chit Swarupam, he refers to Arunachala, Chit Swarupa, your very form, your Swarupa, your real nature is Chit, is awareness. So we need, Arunachala Stuti Panchakam is a tremendously, what Bhagavan has sung in those verses are tremendously important. If we want to understand the oneness of bhakti and jnana, we need to read and imbibe and soak ourselves in Arunachala Stuti Panchakam. This is a good opportunity for me just to say one thing here. A number of people have been asking why, when I'm going to return to discussing the verses of Aksharamlay, which I was doing up till about a year or so ago. In fact, more than a year since I stopped that. I want to take that up again, but it's in order to do, well, I can't do justice to the verses because they're such deep verses, but in order to get as much out of them as I'm capable of, I need to think about them very carefully. So what I was doing, I was writing a series of articles in my blog, and based on those articles, I was giving the talks. I do want to get back to that, but first I want to make available my translations of all of Bhagavan's other works. I mean, all of Bhagavan's works, including Aksharamlay. So I'm now working on these translations. I've spent a good part of the past year working on Uludunaptu Anubandham, and that's now in the proof reading stage. But even while reading the proofs, I'm still refining it further. So it may be, I may be able to post it in a week or so on my blog. That is my translation of Uludunaptu Anubandham. Then my plan is, I want to do all the works of Bhagavan, but so that I had, because several people have asked me to continue talking about Bhagavan's works during these meetings we have twice a month. After I finish this work on Uludunaptu and Bandam, I plan to take up revising my translation of Arunachala and Navamanimalai, the 9 gems to Arunachala. I will work on that, post that on my blog, and then I will at least once or twice a month, I will start talking about those verses while I'm working on other translations. And eventually, I want to post my translation of the whole of of the whole of Aksharamlai, all the 5 hymns, but including Aksharamlai. And then I will return to writing those articles, explaining each verse in depth. And then I'll take up, at these meetings, I'll take up these verses of Aksharamlai. Because all these, we cannot understand Bhagavan adequately without having a deep appreciation of the great treasure he's given us in the form of Arunachala Stuti Panchakam. So maybe by next month, or at least by the following month, I hope, I'll be able to start talking about Navamanimalai during the beginning of each of the meetings, or at least one meeting a month.
Michael is now over 2 hours.
Sorry, the signal isn't very clear. Your voice is breaking up.
Was that enough for one day?
Well, are there more questions?
Yeah, there were 2 more questions.
I can try answering.
Sort of the first one is okay, maybe we can do it very quickly. Did Bhagavan ever go into any great depth about the concept of nishkam karma, the idea of performing actions, that when Michael is speaking and answering questions, where is his attention?
Are you asking where is his attention, or where should his attention be? The easy question is to answer where his attention should be, that is on himself. Where his attention actually is, I'm afraid he often falls short of attending to himself. That is the nature of the mind. Until we completely annihilate the mind is, however many times we try to pull it back in, it goes out again. But we, as much as possible, even in the midst of other activities, and particularly at times like this when we're talking about Bhagavan teaching, we should be trying to remember our own being, I am, as much as possible. Regarding Nishkarmiya Karma, Bhagavan doesn't go into a lot of detail on, but Bhagavan gives us the essence of everything. So all we need to understand about Nishkarmiya Karma, Bhagavan has made clear. We need to act without desire for the fruit. And in order to act without desire for the fruit, we need to act for the love of God. That is, but Bhagavan has also said, but it's recorded in Maharshi's Gospel. He says at one point, I think maybe in talks also, an Atmajnani alone can be a good karma yogi, because we can truly act without desire only when we act without doership. So long as we, as ego, we inevitably, there'll be some desire mixed in with any action. So these are all relative things. When we try to act without desire, we try to minimize the desire with which we act. We try to do the actions for the love of God. We try not to be concerned about the outcome of the action. We try not to seek benefit, personal benefit from the action. But of course, we can do so only to a limited extent. So Bhagavan has talked about Nishkarmiya Karma as a part of the path of bhakti. So according to Bhagavan, Nishkarmiya karma means nishkarmiya puja, nishkarmiya japa, and nishkarmiya jnana. As I said, the nishkarmiya puja doesn't mean just a ritualistic puja, but any action you do for the love of God. Supposing you're conscientious about recycling, because you know that if you just discarding all rubbish is just filling up the landfill sites and creating pollution and it's spoiling the environment. So whatever eco-friendly actions you do, if you do those actions, not because you're going to get any benefit from it, but you do it just for the love of God, you just do it for the love of Bhagavan, because Bhagavan was very, I mean, if Bhagavan had lived in the modern age, he would have, modern age means our 21st century, he would have set us an example by not wasting anything. In the ashram, if Bhagavan saw even a grain of rice or a sesame seed, if he saw it on the ground, he would pick it up, take it to the kitchen and put it in the appropriate bag or tin. So Bhagavan wouldn't waste anything. So for the love of Bhagavan, if we try to live our life accordingly, trying to cause as least harm as possible, trying to minimize our carbon footprint, if we are doing that for the love of Bhagavan, that is also good worship of God. So that is included in Nishkarmiya Puja. So Bhagavan has given us a very broad scope, but he has tied this Nishkarmiya karma to the path of bhakti. Without doing it for the love of God, if we're not acting for the love of God, we'll be inevitably acting for some other karmiya purpose. Even if it's for the satisfaction. I like to do good actions because I like to be a good person. Even that is karmiya, because we get satisfaction out of doing good actions. So in Nishkarmiya karma, we shouldn't do the actions because we are satisfied, but it's good. We do it simply for the love of Bhagavan. Because we know this is the appropriate way of worshipping Bhagavan. Just like Bhagavan wouldn't waste wouldn't even let even a single sesame seed go to waste, we should try to live our life accordingly for the love of Bhagavan. If we want to practice karma yoga, let us think about how Bhagavan would act and try to act accordingly. That itself will be a great karma yoga. In whatever situation we're faced in life, how will Bhagavan act in this way? Of course, we can't perfectly emulate Bhagavan, but trying our best to act in accordance with what Bhagavan has exemplified in his life. That itself is good karma yoga. So not wasting things, being kind, gentle, loving to all, being equally loving to the good and to the bad, having no likes and dislikes. This is how Bhagavan lived, and this is how we should, to the best of our ability, how we should try to live.